Coming up next on Living on the Edge with Chip Ingram.
I want to show you the difference between discipline and punishment. If you don't get it, you will not discipline the right way. Punishment produces some negative things. Discipline produces very positive things.
Do you find yourself getting angry with your children? Do you find yourself trying to discipline them, but the volume is going higher and higher as you yell at your kids, or maybe worse? If there's one area that's difficult for a parent, it's how do we discipline our kids? We're going to talk today about the most controversial issue when it comes to child discipline, and that's the issue of spanking. Is it right? Is it wrong? How would you do it? But before spanking, there's an even bigger issue. Many people think that you need to punish your children. I'm going to go on record to say that God never wants you to punish your children. There's a night and day difference between punishment and discipline. The same action may appear the same, but I will tell you this, when you understand that difference, it changes your heart, it changes your attitude. This is going to be a very positive thing for many of you who have children that you say, I can't do anything with them. Stay with me.
Well, my parents get me to obey by, they buy me stuff, pretty much.
What kind of stuff do they buy you?
Toys, candy, stuff like that.
Yeah, and does it work?
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's more like you're training them than they're training you, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take to get your mom trained?
About a month.
When they say, now obey me, it always means, you know, 3 more chances till I really need to. If I ask Mama for bubble gum or something like that, I beg. If she says no, and if she still says no, I whine. I have a frown, and I roll my eyes back in my head.
She goes, I'm gonna count to 5. If you don't get over here, you're gonna be grounded. 1. She counts really slow though. But I wait until about 2 seconds, and then I run.
What's the highest number you've ever let her count to?
9.
You never done 9.5?
133.
Do you ever like fake cry and whine so your parents or beg? What does that look like? Do you ever whine?
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever whine?
Yeah.
Whine.
I know, if I go like this, she'll give me what I want. I just make this face.
Let me give you a little tip. You say this, mommy, 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 mommy. Ever say this, are we almost there yet? Are we almost there yet? Are we almost there yet? So you just hold your breath until she gives in. What's the longest that's ever taken?
15 weeks.
That sounds like some kind of world record, is it?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to turn to the next page, and I want to talk about the how-to. And when we were looking at this idea of punishment and discipline, I didn't make a big deal out of it, but in the NIV, where it says in Proverbs 3, and he punishes every son, I want you to know that that's a good translation, although in our current context, it is not a good translation. Because the idea of punishment has to do with repaying with vengeance what someone deserves, so they have to pay for what they did. And what I want you to understand is that word in the NIV literally means to forcefully correct, to scourge, literally, to take whatever drastic measure to get this person, whether it's spiritually, in our case with the Lord, or as a parent, to take a drastic measure to get people to obey. But I put a little chart on the top of this page before we get to the how-tos, because I want to show you the difference between discipline and punishment. And there's a huge theological issue I want you to capture. If you don't get it, you will not discipline the right way. You'll punish your kids. And punishment produces some negative things. Discipline produces very positive things. So let me just walk through the difference between punishment and discipline. The purpose of punishment is to inflict penalty for an offense. The purpose of discipline is to train for correction and maturity. The focus of punishment is past misdeeds. You did this, you did this, you did that. The focus of discipline is future correct acts. The attitude, most often in punishment, is hostility and frustration on the part of the parent. You did it, I'm mad, I told you about it, let's get it straight, you're going to pay. Now, we don't always use those words, but our veins popping, our voice escalating, and our body language towering over them gives them an idea that this is probably not an under-control parent who's trying to deter destruction, lovingly providing boundaries for my good. My dad's a wild man right now. What am I going to do? Or my mom is screaming, and we all know what that means. The final result is what I really want you to get, is that when you punish your kids, it results in fear and guilt. And when you discipline your children, it results in security. Now, let me give you a theological little nugget that you need to really grasp. And then I want to, from here, look at those two Hebrew words we talked about as the basis for the how-to of discipline. The gospel, very simply, is that God became a man, came into the earth, lived a perfect life, died, rose again from the dead the third day before over 500 witnesses, and when he died upon the cross, he paid for the sins of all men of all time. Okay? That's the gospel. And that all of us must understand, first, that we have a problem. We have sinned and violated a holy God, and that there is no way to the Father except through the Son, and we need to receive the gift of his work on the cross for our benefit, and that's called salvation. When we do that, the Spirit of God enters our life. We are born again, spiritually birthed, and the Spirit dwelling in us now begins to develop the life of Christ in us. There's some theological words that we don't talk a lot about, but one is called propitiation. And propitiation simply means that because God is holy, when there is sin, he has just wrath or anger. When Jesus was on the cross and he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? God's just wrath for sin, for your sin and my sin and everyone's sin, God took all his just wrath and he placed it on Christ. So that he absorbed, he propitiated, he absorbed the just wrath of God in our place. So God's full and just punishment for all sin, for all time, was placed on Christ. So the gospel is not convincing people about Jesus. The gospel is letting people know, as they did in the New Testament, there's happy news. There's happy news. That's what the word, euangelion, good or happy news. You've been forgiven. The Son of God came. He paid for your sin. Would you like the free gift of salvation? Condition, turn from your wicked way and receive the gift of Christ. Now you say, what's that got to do with discipline of my kids? If Jesus took all the punishment and just wrath of God, he took it for you, he took it for me, and he took it for your kids. I don't want to teach my kids that they've been bad, they've been naughty, and I'm going to make them pay for what they did. I want them to understand the only way to make right what they did is for them to understand when Jesus died on the cross, he paid for it. And I want them to receive that and understand that. And because he paid for it, my role as a parent is not to punish them. Jesus took the punishment. My role is to help them see how that behavior is unpleasing to God, and that my role then is to help them in future acts cooperate with God's work in their life. Does that make sense? See, that means as a parent, are you ready? You can never discipline out of anger, ever. You know what we say to our kids? Go to your room. When you are mad, now I'm not saying you can't get mad. My kids have done things that make me livid. It took me 10 minutes or a day to calm down. But what I know is why I'm livid and mad, I need to go to my room. And I need to get clothed and in my right mind and say, Dear Jesus, I just want to do something very ungodly and very unholy, and I want to scream, and I want to express my anger, and I want to make them pay, and wait a second. You already paid for them. Okay, thank you. Now, I want you to help me righteously deal with my anger, and then I'm going to let them know I'm really upset, but I'm going to make the focus of this interchange them getting right with you and corrective behavior for the future. And the reason I make such a big deal about this is that it really ties into one of the major ways that people discipline, and this whole issue of spanking. You know, when you watch a 20/20 or a 60 Minutes and they show people doing spanking, it's like these wild people, you know, clubbing kids. That's nuts. Here's the premise. I'm going to share a few fairly controversial things in our day. please just listen for the next 5 to 7 minutes. You know, just give me a hearing. And I'm gonna give it from Scripture, then I'm gonna support it, and then I'm gonna talk very clearly about how to do something in terms of the actions, right? How do we discipline our kids? Actions and words. Yasar, yacheg. So then when I do that, then I want you to step back and say, okay, I have a background in educational psychology, you might say to yourself. I've read this, I've read that, I've watched things on TV. You make the decision for yourself whether this type of action is the healthiest way to help your child, okay? Let's look at the 2 Hebrew concepts. The first one is actions or consistent consequences, chastisement with the rod. Proverbs 13:24. This is pretty clear. He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. Let me read that again. This is in the Bible, okay? Well, I want to say that because we can't I like verse 14, but I don't like verse 18. This is in the Bible. He who spares the rod hates his son. Doesn't dislike him, hates his son. But he who loves him disciplines him diligently. Or Proverbs 22:15, folly. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. I would like to suggest that there are, in fact, times to spank your kids. I'd like to suggest that you don't need to do it very often, but I'd like to suggest that God has made little children, once they get old enough, with some extra adipose tissue in an area on their body where it does absolutely no damage. That's a big word for fat, okay? And I would suggest that a lot of us as parents, especially, and I'm talking about kids when they're small, and I'm speaking of only rare instances. I don't mean picking this and that. I mean when your kid steps out and says, I want to take you on. No, I won't do it. Or you have talked about something, for example, you know what? These kids you don't want them to hang out with. And you don't want them to go in the house because you know things that happen and the parents aren't there, and you say to your child, do not hang out with those 3 kids. They're 4 doors down. And do not go in their house. Their parents aren't there. And alcohol's available and drugs are available, and they'll go at a bad. Do not do that. Do you understand? And then you drive by. It's God ordains parents like this. I have no idea how it works. But as you drive by, they're coming out the door. Right? And then you warn them and say, if you ever do that again, here's the time. Now you say, they're 9 years old. If that happens again, I'm going to discipline you. Do you understand exactly what that means? Yeah, I do. Well, 3 days later, same thing happens. Those are times, willful, rebellious attitudes of lying, of stealing, of talking back. When they basically say, there's a line in the sand, and remember they're asking, where's the boundaries? And what they do is they go like this over across that boundary, and they say, is there a real man or a real woman in the house? I don't think so. And they can do that when they're 2 like this, or they can do it when they're 14 like this.